Welcome to another episode of Agenda 2014. In the next half an hour, we'll focus on India's military doctrine. What does it mean for the layman, for the lawmaker, or for that matter, to a military man? And we'll also try to look into the question of the urgent need for a unified command of all the three forces, the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. For a successful and decisive military doctrine or a strategy, a unified command of all the three forces is a must. South Asia, in particular the Indian subcontinent, is perhaps the last holdout spots of the conventional battlefield scenario, the kind recorded in literary documentation down the ages. Two or rather three blocks with their armored divisions in columns, one formation along the Indus Valley and others on the either side of the Himalayas. This picture has one engaging partner on both sides of its northern borders, that is India. Its military might stretched to meet threats on two simultaneous fronts, on the western side from Pakistan and on the eastern front from China. For a big and huge working democracy like India, securing its territorial borders since its inception in 1947 has been the number one priority. The hydrogen bomb, that is the thermonuclear test of 1998 at Pokhran, may have altered the levels for all the right reasons as we perceive. And it was also a turning point in India's regional security paradigm. The Pokhran test marked a sea change in thinking and mindsets for the national political leadership as well as for the military commanders in the field. Once and for all, it became clear that India henceforth need not worry about any breach in its territorial boundaries. No advancing army could afford to make the mistake, in traditional military sense, of marching into the Indian territory. India was now ready to set its eyes beyond its immediate shores to strategically safeguard its assets across the board. At least that was the idea. And that's what India's military doctrine would have pointed out. But as it turned out, it was not the case in the coming years, especially in the months following the Parliament attack in December 2001. And again in November 2008 when terrorists attacked Mumbai. In both cases, Pakistan-backed terrorists had stepped up their assault against India on Indian soil. And in the absence of a working model of a Triforces military doctrine under an elected leadership, India's image took a beating. Glaring cracks became visible in the so-called military doctrine of the time and at more than one place. To understand what went wrong while dealing with such situations, it is vital to note that India always had two different military doctrines or strategies, one aimed against Pakistan and one to counter China. On both these fronts, military commanders knew that friendly political overtures apart, which our national leaders would like to take in order to maintain peaceful relations with both the neighbors, militarily speaking, we as a nation can ill afford to lower our guard. So in 2004, the Indian Army announced a new limited war doctrine, and it became to be known as the Cold Start War Doctrine.
So now, subsequent in the last few years, we have seen that another iteration of the strategy towards Pakistan has come out. It's been called the Cold Start Doctrine. Again, we are talking about quickened pace of mobilization, shallow thrusts into Pakistani territory, cause some attrition, cause some degrading of Pakistani military capability, and also capture small slices of territory, all designed to ensure that Pakistan does not feel the need to use nuclear weapons in response. So that India's option of inflicting some damage on Pakistan for its continued export of terrorism into India, as we saw in Mumbai and earlier in the Parliament attack, etc. So that doesn't go unanswered in a way, and also to put the ball in Pakistan's court so that this kind of activity is reduced to it.
This doctrine was characterized as an exclusively offensive doctrine of Blitzkrieg, drawing its strength from the Israeli and erstwhile Soviet Union concept to launch a retaliatory conventional strike against Pakistan that would inflict significant harm on the Pakistan army before the international community could put pressure on India to withdraw. Not before slicing territories into Pakistan or denting its capability to launch any nuclear level attack. Under this war game, neutralizing Pakistan was planned inside the first 72 hours of the offensive. The cold start doctrine was based on speed, fast mobilization of armored strike divisions and retaining of operational surprise element. All this appeared to be chapters from some imaginary storybook, but it is a stark reality and also perhaps the need of the day. There exists such a military doctrine.
I think I can safely say that we have a military strategy and a military doctrine based on the perceptions of political objectives by various governments over the years. Some have been successful, some have not been successful.
The 2004 Cold Start doctrine was not an overnight concept. It came about with a bitter lesson that authorities had learnt the hard way in the aftermath of the Parliament attack in 2001. Orders were given to mobilize about 500,000 troops during Operation Parakram. Indian forces were dispatched, some up to the linear positions along the western frontier facing Pakistan. Not many of us know that soon after Parliament attack, all three chiefs of staff had called upon the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and sought his permission to attack Pakistan. The plan was to have sliced Pakistan into two separate units from its middle. Prime Minister Vajpayee had turned down the plan.
We need a doctrine to give the political authority an option to punish Pakistan in case of a terrorist attack.
That should be spelled out in black and white.
That should be spelled out, because you can't start looking for options, because the option that was offered by the service chiefs was declined by the political authority. After 2001, 2002, the service chief said that we can wage war on Pakistan. But the political authority, that is the Prime Minister Vajpayee and the National Security Council, declined to adopt that alternative.
Operation Parakram brought to light some bitter truths. As against a given timeline of 48 to 72 hours for mobilization of troops, it took full 3 weeks to move army columns from various locations across the country. By the time a strike force took positions along the Pakistan border, the element of surprise had evaporated. Pakistan had got the time to move its forces, bringing them closer to its international borders. Operation Parakram had failed.
I would much rather have a system by which there is strategic planning and contingency planning that is done on a continuous basis, with the result that this sort of planning and contingency planning will then be in a position, we will then be in a position to judge what is our capability across the spectrum of conflict, starting from sub-conventional warfare right up to the end.
Failure of Operation Parakram apparently emboldened Pakistan to plan more lethal attacks against India. And that's what exactly it did in 2008 when Pakistan trained terrorists entered and attacked Mumbai, killing hundreds of innocents. We take a short break. When we come back, we look into the elusive question of why there has been an unusual delay in formation of a single unified command structure for all the three wings of the armed forces, namely the Army, Navy and the Air Force, and creation of a new Tri-Forces Command. For a successful military doctrine to be implemented flawlessly, you need to have the Army, Navy and the Air Force working in tandem. This is especially so when forces have to operate outside the India. It is nothing new. It has happened in the past, with Tri-Forces experiment turning out to be a grand success. The engagement years were during the World War II. The theatre of war was Burma. Even when our Army and the Air Force and the Navy were deployed in Burma, a Tri-Forces Command had existed.
You see, the last occasion when India fought outside the borders of India was in the Second World War in Burma. And to fight the war in Burma, a Tri-Services Command was made. So it isn't that we haven't learnt our lesson.
And when you talk about military doctrine and exploits of Indian Army, you also talk about Sam Manekshaw, one of the very best examples of military leadership ever.
Many changes have taken place, but one thing remains the same. That is your task and your duty. You are required to ensure the security of this country against any aggressor. What does that mean for you? It means that you should have to fight and fight to win. There is no room for the loser. If you lose, don't come back.
The problems with a working military doctrine and a joint chiefs of staff structure are simple. They arise directly or indirectly out of an inter-services rivalry between the three chiefs of staff. Extend this argument further to a lack of coordination between political elite, bureaucrats and the armed forces. At its worst, it extends to a complete halt to conversation between them.
There is a civil military disconnect, you can say, on this aspect. I would say that we cannot leave these issues to a crisis situation. When the defense minister or the prime minister goes into the military operations directorate and starts asking the armed forces what they can do or can't do, there has to be a continuous engagement. Given the overarching nuclear shadow that is falling on the India-Pakistan equation, we need to prepare ourselves. I think there has to be a synergy in terms of what the political leaders think and what the military leadership can do, and that has to be talked about and discussed and a joint strategy evolved.
Apart from the visible disconnect between politicians and military leaders, there has also been an inter-services rivalry, which has crippled a series of modernization efforts in the past. The story of the country's military doctrine appears to be no different. The Air Force believes that it is a superior force and plays a decisive role in the outcome of a war. The Navy, which does not operate within the India's territorial boundaries but is deployed away from the country's shores, always had a different line on the terms of engagement.
We don't have a tri-service doctrine. We should have a doctrine for all the three armed forces, which we don't. The Navy has its role only outside the territorial waters of India. Therefore, it has no role in territorial integrity as such. So there has been a disconnect between the Army and the Air Force, which originally thought that their role was to protect territorial integrity, and the Navy, which felt that it had to locate its aims beyond the borders of the country.
Military analyst points out that the time is just right for India to assert its presence in a bolder way in the Indian Ocean area. This applies especially to what is known as the Blue Water Navy, marking its presence at all the choke points in the region.
Now, you would recall that the Ministry of Defence has enunciated what are areas of strategic interest to India. And in that, so they have said that the Central Asian states in the north and the segment of Indian Ocean enclosed between the Malacca Straits and the Straits of Hormuz are our areas of deep interest.
In comparison to the Cold Start doctrine, which is aimed at Pakistan and which is defensively offensive, the strategy against the China has been outrightly defensive at all times.
There has been a continuous evolution. Firstly, one has to differentiate between our strategy towards Pakistan and the strategy towards China. The strategy towards Pakistan, like I said, defensive, offensive, while the principal problem in India-Pakistan relations has always been Pakistan's claims to Kashmir and its attempts continuously over the last 65 years to revise the status quo as it exists. The strategy towards China has always been defensive, largely. It's a function of several factors. Most important, I think, it's the power disparity between India and China, and also the fact mountain warfare is not very easy. It is troop intensive, and also it's much more difficult, let me put it that way, instead of marching across the plains or the desert.
A new strike force comprising of about 90,000 new troops is being raised only to counter the Chinese forces. This strike force will be deployed predominantly in Arunachal Pradesh, a territory China claims in its entirety. India has learnt many of its military lessons the hard way, particularly those that came in the aftermath of the 1962 war with China. A military engagement gone horribly wrong in all possible ways.
Your military strategy, your military doctrine, and the effectiveness of both can only be as good as your national policy asset. So in 1962, I'm not too sure we had our political objectives quite in place, as a result of which there was military setbacks. But we had, we were totally ill-equipped at that time, now in terms of our weaponry, in terms of our clothing, in terms of our, even in the Northeast, I think in terms of our operational preparedness. So the political objectives did not factor in your military capability. So when they don't match, then you have these setbacks.
Defense experts say that apart from the traditional theatres of war, land, sea and the air, two other dimensions have been added: space and the cyber world. Wars of the future, it is said, will take place in another less visible but more lethal realm. Expect the first salvo by the advancing army to be fired in the cyber world, followed closely by the space dimension.
Today, space is the fourth domain of warfare, and weaponization of space is, to my mind, inevitable. Militarization took place right from the word go, but weaponization of space is inevitable. And space has got such a direct bearing on the capability of the Army, Navy and Air Force that it is possible that the first shots in the next war could be in space.
In 2004, the Indian Army establishment brought out what they called the Indian Army Doctrine, dealing geostrategic environment in the region and enumerating what might be the future military operations look like, giving examples of low-intensity conflict operations and the non-combat operations. The 45-page document was more aimed at the cadets and soldiers of its training command. Nonetheless, it gave an outline of different scenarios of possible war games that Indian Army could face.
In the year 2004, a doctrine, military doctrine was prepared by the Army's ARC-TRAC command. One has subsequently not seen a military doctrine prepared by the joint services of the three services. But despite that, within the armed forces, one cannot truly function without a doctrinal concept.
By a rough estimate, the Indian Army consumes about 50% of the total outlay of the defense budget, which is proportionate to its size. 22% goes of the defense budget outlay to the Air Force, and just about 18% is left for the Navy. All said and done, our military establishment needs the most important task to be completed at an early date for a viable military doctrine. At the center of this is the need to establish the joint Tri-Forces command structure. This is Vineet Dikshit for Agenda 2014. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.